Deep in the heart of the rainforest, hidden from the eyes of the world, lives a creature with a secret, one that could change everything we know about life, survival, and even human existence. A faint rustling in the dense foliage breaks the silence, followed by a slow, deliberate breath. Something is there just beyond the shadows, massive, watching. Not just with the instinct of a wild animal, but with something more, something almost human. Eyes, dark and knowing, peer through the mist, unblinking. The air is thick with tension, the sounds of the jungle fading into an eerie hush. Then, in a voice so soft it almost vanishes into the wind, a whisper escapes. Low, deliberate, and impossible. A voice that shouldn't exist. A message not meant to be heard. Dr. Emily Carter had spent years in the jungle, dedicating her life to studying the great apes. But something about this particular gorilla was different. Koba wasn't just intelligent. He was aware. The way he moved, the way his eyes lingered just a second too long, as if he was studying her just as much as she was studying him. And then there were the whispers. It had to be a trick of the wind. Emily muttered to herself the first time she heard it. A soft, breathy sound, barely distinguishable from the rustling leaves. But it wasn't the wind. It was coming from him, from Koba. Sitting just a few feet away, the massive silverback lowered his head slightly, lips moving ever so subtly. The sound wasn't a growl, wasn't a grunt. It was something else, a pattern. A deliberate sequence of noises strung together in a way that sent chills through her body. "No, that's impossible," she whispered, barely believing her own voice. She had spent years deciphering primate communication, mapping out vocalizations, body language, and even rudimentary sign language. But this wasn't just communication. This was speech, broken, fragmented, but undeniable. It was as if Koba was trying, struggling, to say something. And the more she listened, the more she realized it wasn't just sounds. It was numbers, coordinates, a location buried deep in the jungle. But why? That night, Emily pored over her notes, cross-referencing maps and old tribal records. The coordinates pointed to a place that didn't officially exist. An untouched valley hidden beyond the known trails of the rainforest. The local tribes spoke of it in whispers, calling it the Vale, a land protected by spirits, forbidden to outsiders. But was it really just a myth? If Koba knew about it, what else did he know? The next day, as she approached Koba's usual spot, she felt an unease she couldn't explain. He was waiting for her, sitting motionless in the thick undergrowth, his dark eyes fixed on hers. This time, there was no mistaking it. A sound, a whisper, barely escaping his lips. One word, one warning. Danger. Danger. The word echoed in Emily's mind long after she left the clearing. She played the recording over and over, but no matter how many times she listened, the truth remained the same. Koba had spoken, not an accident, not a random sound, a deliberate warning. But warning her about what? Or who? She traced the coordinates again, her fingers trembling slightly as she marked the spot on her map. Deep in the heart of the jungle, beyond any documented paths, lay the location Koba had whispered. The hidden valley. What was so important about it that he had broken every known limit of animal communication just to tell her? Emily spent the next few days searching for answers. The local tribes avoided the topic entirely, their faces turning grim at the mere mention of the valley. But after enough persuasion, an elder finally spoke. His voice was low, cautious. The land you seek is sacred, guarded by those who have lived longer than time itself. It holds life and death. She barely had time to process his words before she found something even more unbelievable. Ancient journals hidden away in an abandoned research outpost deep in the jungle. The fragile, yellowed pages described something she never expected. Accounts of a plant, a species unknown to modern science. A single leaf, when consumed, capable of healing wounds, reversing disease, even extending life itself. The words sent a chill down her spine. If this was true, then the valley wasn't just a forgotten piece of land. It was a secret of unimaginable power, a cure, a discovery that could change the fate of millions. But Koba? He didn't want her to find it. He wanted to protect it. That's when she realized the real danger. If she could find this information, then so could others. And if the wrong people knew what was hidden in that valley, they wouldn't stop until they had taken it for themselves. That night, as she lay awake in her tent, she heard something move just beyond the trees. A presence watching. A twig snapped. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Not an animal, not Koba. Someone else knew. And they were already coming for it. Emily barely had time to react before the jungle swallowed the sound again, leaving only the rhythmic hum of insects and the distant cries of nocturnal animals. But she knew what she heard. Someone had been there, watching, listening. The realization sent a cold wave of fear through her. She wasn't the only one who knew about the valley. By morning, she confirmed her worst fear. Her camp had been searched, her notebooks disturbed, her satellite phone missing. This wasn't just a coincidence. Someone was trying to get ahead of her, and if they had her coordinates, they already knew where to go. She hurried to find Koba, but the moment she reached the clearing, she knew something was wrong. The jungle was too quiet. The usual rustling of his troop, the playful screeches of the young ones, it was gone. And then she saw them. Footprints. Human. Leading deeper into the trees. The ground was disturbed, signs of a struggle, broken branches, scattered leaves, the unmistakable imprint of a body being dragged. Panic tightened her chest. Koba and his troop were in danger. Someone had taken them. She ran, following the tracks as fast as she could. But she wasn't the only one racing against time. Across the jungle, forces were moving. A pharmaceutical company with unlimited resources, desperate to claim the valley's secret. Illegal poachers, seeing only profit in the rare creatures that guarded it. Government agents torn between the promise of a cure and the threat of ecological disaster. And in the middle of it all, a single gorilla, whispering a warning no one else could understand. Emily reached the edge of a ridge and froze. Below, deep in the jungle, she spotted them. Armed men moving through the trees, their destination clear. They were heading toward the valley, toward the secret that was never meant to be found. She had a choice to make. Reveal the truth and risk losing everything to greed and corruption, or bury it forever, ensuring that Koba's warning wasn't in vain. The whisper echoed in her mind once more. Danger. But this time, it wasn't just a warning. It was a promise. The fight to protect the valley had just begun. Emily didn't hesitate. She had spent years as an observer, a scientist, someone who simply recorded the behaviors of the creatures she studied. But this wasn't research anymore. This was a battle, a race against those who would destroy everything for profit. And Koba, he was at the center of it all. She moved quickly through the dense foliage, staying low, her heart pounding against her ribs. The men ahead of her weren't just explorers. They were mercenaries, hired hands who had no interest in conservation, no respect for the delicate balance of the jungle. They were here for one thing, control. Control of the valley, of the cure, of whatever they could exploit. A sudden roar shattered the quiet. Not human, powerful, furious, Koba. Emily pushed forward, breaking through the trees just in time to see the chaos unfold. The poachers had underestimated him. Even bound, even surrounded, Koba was still the king of the jungle. With a strength that defied logic, he ripped through his restraints, knocking two men to the ground with a single swipe. The others raised their weapons, but before they could fire, the jungle itself seemed to rebel. A rush of movement, Koba's troop. They emerged from the shadows, moving as one, a force of nature, driven not just by instinct, but by something deeper. Loyalty, protection. Gunfire erupted. Emily dropped to the ground, her ears ringing as bullets tore through the trees. But the mercenaries weren't just fighting animals. They were fighting a force they didn't understand. The guerrillas were fast, intelligent, using the jungle to their advantage. Within seconds, the tide turned. Emily saw her chance. She scrambled forward, grabbing a flare gun from one of the fallen men. She had one shot, one chance to end this before more reinforcements arrived. Taking a deep breath, she fired. The flare shot into the sky, a blazing red streak cutting through the thick jungle canopy. The sound carried for miles, a warning, a call for help. The local conservationists, the few allies she had left, would see it, and the world would know what was happening here. Koba turned to her, his dark eyes locking onto hers. There was something there. Understanding, gratitude. He took a step back, then another, disappearing into the shadows of the trees, leading his troop away. They had won this battle, but Emily knew the war wasn't over. The valley was still out there. The secret still existed. And as long as it did, there would always be those who wanted to take it. But as the jungle fell back into silence, one final whisper drifted through the air, carried by the wind, barely audible, yet unmistakable. Protect. The jungle was quiet again, but Emily knew it wouldn't last. The flare had done its job, alerting those who could help, but it had also drawn attention from those who wanted the valley's secret for themselves. She stood amidst the fallen men, some groaning in pain, others unconscious. The mercenaries had been defeated, but their employers wouldn't give up so easily. She turned toward the trees, searching for any sign of Koba. He was gone, his troop vanished into the thick undergrowth, as if they had never been there at all. But she could still feel his presence, like the jungle itself was watching, protecting. She took a deep breath, steadying her thoughts. She had come here as a scientist, searching for knowledge. Instead, she had found a truth more powerful than any discovery. A rustling behind her made her spin around, heart racing. But it wasn't an enemy. A familiar face emerged from the trees. Miguel, her closest ally in the region, a conservationist who had spent years fighting to keep illegal operations out of the rainforest. His eyes darted to the scene before him, taking in the scattered bodies, the broken equipment, the unmistakable signs of a battle. "You started a war, Emily," he said, his voice low, urgent. "I didn't start it," she replied, shaking her head. "But I'm going to finish it." Miguel sighed, running a hand through his sweat-dampened hair. "You know they won't stop. As long as the valley exists, they'll keep coming. And next time, they'll be smarter, more prepared." Emily clenched her fists, glancing down at the torn notes in her hand, the coordinates, the research, everything she had worked for, everything she had risked her life to find. She looked at Miguel, her decision made. Without another word, she tore the pages apart, letting the pieces scatter into the wind, carried away by the jungle. If they can't find it, they can't take it. Miguel nodded, understanding. The valley would remain untouched, its secrets safe. For now. But Emily knew the real fight wasn't over. It wasn't just about one hidden paradise. It was about all of it. The rainforest, the animals, the fragile balance of life that so many sought to exploit. As they walked away from the battlefield, she glanced back one last time. Somewhere deep within the jungle, Koba was watching. His mission wasn't over. Neither was hers. And just before she turned away, a single whisper rode the wind, barely more than a breath, but clear enough to send chills down her spine. "Thank you." The world would never know what had truly happened in the jungle that day. The mercenaries would report a failed mission, their employers would regroup, and the legend of the valley would fade once again into myth. But Emily knew the truth. She had seen it, heard it, felt it in the whispered warning of a creature that should never have been able to speak. As she boarded the small seaplane waiting at the river's edge, she glanced back one last time at the dense green horizon stretching endlessly behind her. The jungle had swallowed its secrets once again, protecting them as it always had. But for how long? Miguel sat beside her, silent as the plane lifted into the sky. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Only the distant hum of the engine filled the space between them, the weight of everything that had happened pressing down like an unspoken truth. "Do you regret it?" Miguel finally asked, staring out at the jungle below. Emily exhaled slowly, watching the winding river disappear beneath the clouds. "No," she said. "But I don't think it's over." Miguel nodded, understanding. The valley was safe for now, but the greed of man was relentless. Others would come, others would search, and maybe someday someone would find what she had worked so hard to protect. But as the jungle faded into the horizon, she held on to a quiet hope. Koba was still out there, watching, guarding, a protector of something far greater than himself. And as the wind rushed past the plane's windows, Emily could almost hear it again. Soft, distant, but undeniable. A whisper. Protect.